right, this is going to be kind of a first video. A new crash course on ProffieOS4. So there's so much to cover it gets pretty in depth, I'll have to get pretty in depth as we go along. But I wanted to kind of have a start point, so I'm going to use the library as a start point because I think just from the when I had polled people, a lot of people are using these styles and I want to be able to edit. I know some people are already going to ask. Frederick will be updating Style Editor. He obviously needs time to do that, but I believe he has started or will be starting. So eventually the Style Editor will be available, which will make some of this a little easier. But for those of you who are inclined to already hand code or just make small modifications, this will kind of be a foot in the door. For those of you who just want to take the styles from the library and then make small tweaks, I'm going to try to explain it to help you. And try to show it. So with layers in OS4, it actually is a ton. It's a lot simpler to make edits and to update styles. But it's also a pretty big change from how styles have been made prior to OS4. So all the styles in my library are going to be in the new format. Now, so I'm going to use one of the examples. Now, I do have some styles here that don't have customize and enhance. They are primarily the 4.2 versions, so they have slightly different syntax. So if you grab one of the ones that just says get style, and it doesn't say customize enhance next to it, those are kind of a blend of 4.2 and 4.3. So over time, I'll get to those and fix them. So mostly for our example and what I'm going to start with, it's going to be any of the styles that you can customize and enhance, which is the bulk of the styles on the library. So using my library, I'm just going to start with a simple one. I have separate videos on how to use the library. So if you haven't seen those, check those out. But I'm just going to go in, I'm going to grab a style. So this style here has the customize and enhance, and you can choose your options, and this list will grow. So for our purposes, I'm going to load this one up with a ton of stuff. Get that. I'm going to get power up. I'll get a cooldown. We'll do this and this. We'll do a force boost. I'll leave out the emitter effect for now. Leave out that, leave out that, leave out that, but I'll add a passive battery monitor. And then you do get style, and that puts the style in your clipboard. And then for our purposes, I am going to paste it into just WordPad. So, people use different programs. This is what I use. So right now, off the bat, it looks like a lot. But with layers, it's actually not. So let me take a step. So with layers, basically what it is you're actually just literally layering effects on top of each other. So the nesting and the wrapping from previous versions, if you've seen my previous videos or if you're just familiar, is gone with the latest update to OS4. So you can still do it. All the styles from 3.9 and earlier will work if you're used to that format and you want to use Style Editor. All of that's possible. The caveat being the responsive styles are only layers, and they will only work if your style is layered. Now you can also blend, and I do that a little bit. You can blend old styles with layers. But for best effect, you want to kind of just build it as a layer. So let's take a quick peek here. So you get a style from the library. And this here is, so you get your layers. And what I'm going to do, the easiest way to do it is you're going to look for, you're basically looking for the starting points of each thing. So here's the opening of layers. So I'm going to put an enter there. And then I am going to now look for anything. So I'm looking for a close and a comma with something else. And there's two, in most of the library styles, there's basically going to be responsive and then transition effect. So that's really what you're looking for. So it kind of wraps here, but everywhere there's a comma and then transition effect, or a comma and responsive. That's what I'm mostly going to be looking for. those are the two primary pieces I use in almost all the styles on the library. So we're going to find this. We're going to put a break there. We're going to find the next transition effect, which is here. And I'm going to put a break there. I'm going to find, so now I have a responsive. So this is the responsive lockup. Put a break. I'm going to see responsive lightning block. Put a break. And responsive blast. Put a break. Responsive clash. Transition effect. Transition effect. Responsive stab. Responsive drag. Responsive melt. Transition effect. And this is a big style, so there's a lot in here. Another transition effect. Another transition effect. And let's see, is this all one? That's all. Is there one more in here? Okay. And then there should be, I missed one. The last one, so is this inout TRL. In inout, there's, in my styles in the library, it's all inout TRL. All right, so let's talk about layers. So now this is broken out. So layers, all the layers are essentially, they're all signified with a suffix of L in front of them. So you'll see transition effect L, responsive lockup L, responsive lightning block L. All the responsive stuff are only L versions. There is no non-layered version. And then in the case of this inout TRL, that is the layered version of inout TR. So what happens with layers is the first one is your base, and that should be your base style. So this is the base style of this particular style. So this is the base effect of this style. So it's an audio flicker, it's got red and RGB. The rotate colors variation I'll have to cover in another video, but that's basically the new color wheel. So you'll see that throughout, but you don't really have to change that because I have all the different versions. Now, if you wanted to, you can change these colors, and that just is your start color. But we'll cover that stuff at another time. All right, so for transition effect, when you're looking at this, there's a lot going on, but the easiest way to tell what it is for transition effect is at the end. So this is the force effect. So if you chose force boost, this is what would be controlling the force boost. In it, in all the transition effects, you're going to see a transition. You're going to see what it should be doing. And then in some of them, you'll see multiple transitions with the TR concat. So this one has a fade in. It's got the swing speed set up for white. It's got a delay, which is how long that force effect will be visible. And then it's a repeat of the swing speed. And then it has a fade out. And that is triggered by using the force. This transition effect is lockup end. And these I build in. So all of my lockup effects actually have two transitions out. One is built into the responsive lockup, which we'll talk about in a second. The second one is the lockup end. As a transition, what I'm doing in mine is actually layer a background dispersion along with a fade out of the actual lockup section. So that's why this is done that way. You don't have to do it that way. I do it that way because I like the visual, but you don't have to include a second transition effect if you don't want to. So this one is the lockup end. We'll find the other transition effects here. This transition effect is on ignition, so that's your power up. This one's on retraction, so this is your power down. And we've got this one here is on boot. So this is the passive battery monitor for boot. And then this is the version that runs this is the passive battery monitor for when you change your font. And lastly, this really big guy, this is the pre-on effect. So this one was the overload, so it actually has a lot of stages to it, which you can see written out through here. So now, all right, so that's the transition effects. The responsive effects, each one is a little different, and the templates can get a little complex. We've defaulted a lot of this in the OS just to simplify it for users. This version that I have right now is expanded out to help kind of people to be able to modify some stuff. So in a responsive effect, the first value is the color of that particular effect. So in this case, for lockup, I use a strobe with a brown flicker, and this is to create that kind of instability. But then the first piece you see is the actual, is going to be what happens when you initiate. So that is, right now it's an instant flash of light, and then it fades to the actual effect. And then this is the transition out. So there's a fade effect out. And like I said, it's layered with this guy here. Then this piece here. So this is all new stuff. And this I'll have to cover separately. But for your purposes, if you're just starting out, this basically is two pieces of the responsive control. There's actually other stuff running alongside of it. But these two pieces are the pieces that I think people might have a use for. So the main thing you're going to look at is this portion of the responsive lockup in particular is what sets your basically your restrictive area. So your top and your bottom for how far that responsive lockup section is going to move while you change your blade angle. And this is one of the changes we made for 4.3 is it's actually got two controls on the same piece, just to give more realism to the movement. So scale, blade angle, the function stuff, I'm going to have to do totally a separate video to get into the real fine tuning. But for your purposes, what's happening essentially is the highest value you see, which on mine is right now set at the 22,000. That's the uppermost portion of the blade that the effect will ever go. And then the 6,000 is the lowermost portion of the blade that it will ever go. And those two are the two pieces that you can change if you want to change that range. So increasing from 22,000 up will allow that lockup section to move closer to your tip. If you lower that value, if you lower that 22,000, it's going to restrict that movement down more towards the lower portion of the tip. So for all of the movement values, the range is actually 0 to 32,768. So roughly 0 to 32,000. And that's the full range, 0 being your hilt, the 32,768 being the tip. So this gives you that kind of control. Now you don't have to know that. So I've designed the responsive effects so that you don't have to touch this. It's only if you want to. If you wanted to limit it more, if you found it was moving particularly too far up the blade, you would just lower that 22,000 value. You could do it probably 18,000 would probably be good. That would lock it pretty close to being the lower half of the blade only for movement. If you want it to move a lot further, you can increase that value a little bit. Everything else in there does stuff, but for starting out, that's not where I think your attention should be. If you're happy with the lockup movement, don't touch any of these. There's no need to. But if you wanted to adjust top and bottom of that movement area, those are the values you would change. And you can play with them, but that's in there. Lightning block for lightning block, it has a really crazy function running it, so that there's no parameters you can change. You can only change if you want to change the fade in or the fade out. These are the timings on them. So this is the value for fading in on the effect, and then it's got a bunch of stuff going on, and then this is the fade out. Or if you want to change the actual what's happening in the lockup, or the lightning, that's the first value here. This is the actual effect for lightning that'll appear in the 3 spots that are generated. They all share the same color effect, but they all do different things, and they have all the parameters built in to allow for the randomization animation, as well as the control with the blade angle, tightening it up and focusing it, and the twist angle, increasing or decreasing intensity. Those values are not able to be modified unless you want to go into the .h file and change them, but there's a lot going on there, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Then responsive blast is pretty straightforward. This is the color for blast. If you wanted to change it, that's the one most people want to change. And then these values are, I forget, look at the template. I actually forgot what each of these does, but it's size, speed, and fade, I think, for this particular one, and there's different blast options. Anywhere you see a scale, that means it's doing something responsive, essentially. So in this case, it's using the speed of your swing. As you move that blade faster, it's going to increase. This one increases the size of that blast area. So your range would be 100 to 400. So if you wanted to modify that. Responsive clash, similarly, this is the clash color is first. And it's an instant. Obviously, you want that to instantly appear. You're going to have the fade out after it's done. Again, there's other clashes, so it depends on the version you chose. And then this is the control. So these controls are designed to mimic that lockup section control. So similarly, my recommendation, if you happen to change your lockup top or bottom, I would make that same change here just so it stays in line. You don't have to, just a recommendation. But if you change either of those, they're going to mimic into the clash. And again, that's just setting your parameter for where that responsive section moves based on the angle of your blade. And then responsive stab is pretty simple. You can, you really only need to change the color if you want. And then you can change your animation, which is, I use a wipe in, wipe out for stab. Drag, this is the drag color. And again, drag's pretty straightforward. You can change the transition in and out on it. Melt. So melt, I built this in. This mix here is what does that heating and cooling. So if you want to change the colors that are used, you would change them in here. If you replace this mix with anything else, then you're going to lose that responsive turning of the hilt to change the temperature. So you can, but if you take this piece out, it won't do the responsive color changing of heating the material. And then let's talk about the inout TRL. So the inout TRL, which just got introduced for 4.3, this is now your inout helper. This version is for transitions. I use that exclusively in the library because it allows for that choose of cycle up and cycle down, the wipe out, all the other versions I have. If you use inout helper L, you can only do the regular extension and retraction. But with both inout helpers or inout TRL, the layers, that layer is going to be a black layer that's going to stay on top of everything else. And what that does is that makes your blade off. So if you're building your own styles, I'm going to drop some seeds here. I'm not going to show how to build a style from scratch right now. I have to work up to that. But this has to be in the position it's in to work properly. So if you move it, you might have effects showing when your blade is off. So there's a specific order to layering. Some things are interchangeable, but other things have to be in certain spots in order for everything to work properly. So essentially, this inout TRL is going to be the close of everything that happens when the blade is on, because you want it laying over those. So layering, making the assumption people understand layers for like graphic design and stuff. But so your first layer, the one up here, that's the base layer. And then you have everything kind of stacking on top of it. So everything happens over that base layer. That base layer is always running in the background. Everything happens over the top of it. So in this instance here, this layer is laying over the top of all the effects for when it's on as a black layer until you turn the blade on. When you turn the blade on, that's what activates the wipe, which will wipe the black away. And then everything below it is visible. And then when you retract, it wipes in, and that turns the blade back to black, which covers up everything for when the blade is on. So these two timings here, and there's a bunch of different transitions based on what you choose, but the timings are in here. So for inout TRL, the first one is your ignition, and that's your timing. So if you need to change the extension time, it's really just that 300, or there's other values if you choose different extensions. The defaults are listed under the question mark. And then your retraction is, in this case, 500, so you would change that there. That's where what you need to do really to just change those. If you're going to change the transitions, you can change them using the enhanced screen. It'll give you the code, or if you want to change them here, just keep mindful of your syntax for transitions. But that's that inout TRL. And again, that has to stay where it's at to work properly. If you were to move this further earlier in the layers, then other effects might show through while the blade is off. And if you move it towards the end, all the effects below it are ones that have to run after the blade is off. So your boot effect, which is the passive battery monitor, this is also a second passive battery monitor for when you change fonts. Those run when the blade is off. So if they were under the inout TRL layer, you actually wouldn't see them. So they have to be on top of that layer. And then lastly is the pre-on effect, because the pre-on effect has to run before the blade ignites. That has to be on top of your inout layer. And then again, these are, I've helped a few people with timings. So the pre-on effect, I've said it in other videos, but the pre-on effect, it will display for as long as the pre-on wave file in that particular preset runs. Mine default out to, I think, 8,000 milliseconds on purpose, but you can easily change it. Now, these are concats, so they have a lot of steps to them. Some of them are simple, so they only have one. But the fade combination, so you have a first fade of 2,000 milliseconds. Then we have a second fade of 2950. And then we have a third fade of 3,000. So I shave off 50 milliseconds just for when you first boot the Saber up. If you ignite it, sometimes there's a slight delay if it's like an immediate boot and ignite, just because the board's kind of doing its thing. So that's what that. So it's 7950 milliseconds by definition, but for our intent and purposes, I call it 8,000 milliseconds. But these three timings that you see here in the fades for this particular pre-on would be what you would change out. You do want to have it be at least as long as your pre-on wave. Otherwise, if the pre-on wave keeps playing and the animation finishes, then you'll have the black visible before ignition. Now, you might want that, but typically you want to keep this within the 100 milliseconds of at least matching, or maybe 100 milliseconds longer than your pre-on wave for full effect. But if you have a really short pre-on wave, it doesn't matter that this is 8,000 milliseconds, because it's going to ignite over this. It's actually going to ignite behind this, even while the pre-on is running. So you probably want to time this one out. But that's the main thing. So everything in here you can edit, but I just wanted to kind of point out the basic stuff. And this format, in terms of being able to read it, helps. So just kind of going back to it. And you can leave it expanded like this in your config file. I know some people do that already because they like it. I keep everything bunched up, but that's just me. But this is just kind of a start point. So I'm hoping to get more time to do more videos, starting a little more with some more in-depth stuff. But for those of you who are jumping in now, who want to make some small changes to the existing styles from the library, those are the main ones that I've had questions about. So I wanted to just kind of get this out there for everybody. There is a lot you can do now, particularly with all the new controls and functions and layers. It's actually just so much that it's going to have to be kind of a little bit at a time for everybody to kind of, not only for me to get some videos together, but also for everybody to kind of follow along. So, hopefully you all are having some fun with 4.3. If anybody runs into any bugs in the OS, please report it on the TRA thread. If anybody has a problem with the website, you can just hit me up, just message me either through TRA or through Facebook. I've done a lot of changes lately, but I've tested almost everything out, but it doesn't mean that there's not a bug in the HTML itself. So if you use a style from the library and it's not working right, or it doesn't compile, let me know and I'll take a peek. Most of the time it's probably just something with the HTML. It might not actually be the OS. But we're hopefully get this all tested. Once it's all done and Frederick's happy, then we'll get our full release, and then the fun will really begin. So hope you enjoy. Thanks.